Welcome again to another special edition of Pat's Chat, our Final Four Rewind, brought to you by Jim McKay Chevrolet. I'm your host, Bill Rowland, and today we're talking with the man who was the architect of that amazing run 15 years ago, now the head coach of the Miami University, Jim Larrañaga. And, Coach, you look back on this run from 15 years ago, and we've talked to a lot of the players. We've talked to some of your assistant coaches, and the smile and the energy it brings to them even 15 years later is amazing. I imagine all the games that you've done, all the seasons you've done, it still does the same for you on some level.
Oh, it sure does, Bill. And I'm sure one of the reasons is every time you talk to someone, they take credit for getting us to the Final Four. It doesn't matter if it was a player or a coach, a guy who didn't play much. Everybody likes to feel that they contributed to that awesome run.
Coach, let me ask you, going back 5 years prior to that, we were just looking at some stuff in 2001, how close you may have been, not necessarily to a Final Four, but to get to a Sweet 16 or maybe even an Elite 8. Do you ever look at that as kind of the building block to 2006, how close you guys were then?
Well, that year we lost to Maryland out in Idaho, and we had a very, very good chance of winning the game. We were up 1 with under a minute to go. Steve Blake made a 3 to put them up 2. We had the last possession. There was a turnover, and we ended up losing the game. But yes, at that time, I thought we were good enough. We had enough skilled players, enough size and athletic ability to compete with the best teams in the country, including Maryland, who made it to the Final Four that year and won the national championship with those guys returning for their senior year.
You look at 2006, and a lot of the guys have talked about that summer prior to the season starting and how you had kind of gotten on them about losing to Michigan State in the BB&T the year before and said, hey, look, that's a team that went to the Final Four. We could compete with them. They all said to a man, they kind of laughed about it. We're like, wait a minute, Coach, what are you thinking? But in retrospect, obviously, it worked out. You were right. They could compete with those teams.
Well, that's what was great about the matchup with Michigan State the following year. When we made the NCAA tournament, one of my questions to the players, we lost to these guys without Tony Skinn in the BB&T by 6 points. And I asked them quite simply, are we 6 points better than we were last year? And to the man, they all said yes. And I said, well, then we need to go into this game with a great deal of confidence and play our best game. Because once you do that, if you can go on a roll in the NCAA tournament, you can get red hot in a very short period of time.
When you look at that 2005-06 team, obviously, looking back at 99 and 2001, those NCAA tournament teams, you were running the scramble a lot. You were running and jumping. You were trapping. That 05-06 team really didn't unleash that trap until the North Carolina game in the second half. What was it about that team that you felt like they were better playing the gaps, kind of a pack line defense rather than the usual run and trap?
Well, the funny thing is, we trailed Carolina in the first half, like 16-4 early in the game. And we were behind, I believe, 27-21 or 28-21. Something.
Yeah.
What was it?
27-20.
27-20. But I had a conversation with my son, Jay, who's now the assistant coach with the Boston Celtics, the night before the game. And he said, Dad, if you fall behind in the first half, I know your immediate reaction is going to be to go after them and scramble. Don't do it. Fall back into a zone and bide your time. I said, why in the heck would I do that? And he said, because Roy Williams is too good a coach. If you give him halftime to make the adjustments, then the scramble will not be effective. But if you save the scramble for the second half, they could become unraveled, and it could be a big change in momentum. So I took my son's advice. We fell behind 16-4. Instead of going to scramble then, we went to the zone. We got back in the game. We're behind 27-20, but we started the second half in the scramble, and I believe we forced either 3 or 4 straight turnovers and ended up catching up to them at the first TV timeout.
Coach, you're going to like this even better. It was 6 straight turnovers to start that second half by your
was
team.
it 6?
Six
Wow.
in a row. Yeah, and you guys, again, took the lead 28-27. That's when Roy is slamming the chair. What are you talking to your guys about at that point when you look over and you see a guy like Roy Williams, a Hall of Fame coach, and you've got him and his team completely rattled?
Well, I went back to what I had told the team in the first half. And when we fell behind 16-4 at that timeout, I said to the guys, listen to me. Look down at their bench. They think this game is over. They're celebrating like they've already won. And we haven't even begun to play George Mason basketball. Go out and play our game, and we'll be back in this by the half. In the second half, when we tied the game up or moved out in front, and Roy called the timeout and was slamming the chair, I told the players again, look down there now. They are feeling the pressure of being the higher seed.
So, Coach, one of the things you talk about the North Carolina game and them being frustrated, I went back and watched that game, and it didn't matter down 16-2, 16-4 early. Didn't matter, pressure late in the game. It looked like, especially guys like Butler and Campbell, were just having fun the entire game. I know we talked about having fun off the floor, and you're going to have the most fun of any team at the NCAA tournament, but your guys just seemed to have fun no matter what the situation was on or off the court.
Well, I hope that message came across to the players because my coaching staff and I kept emphasizing that. One of the most difficult challenges for any coach during the NCAA tournament is how to get your team to function at their best. And most of the time, players put a lot of pressure on themselves. And what happens is players then tighten up. They miss shots that they could make. They make ill-advised decisions. They rush. And we wanted to keep them cool, calm, and collected throughout the tournament. And those guys did. Lamar, Tony Skinn, Fowler Campbell, Will Thomas, Jai Lewis. I remember having a conversation with Dr. Rotella. And Bob Rotella is a good friend. He had already spoken to the team a number of times about staying loose and being positive and smiling. But I couldn't get Will Thomas to smile. Will was like, he was a very quiet young man, very intense. And as much as I was trying, eventually I called Bob Rotella and I said, what can I do? Should I be yelling at this guy? And he said, absolutely not. Because he's about to blow up either on you for yelling at him or on the opponent. Let him blow up during the game. And what he meant by blow up was just play incredible basketball. And Will did. His defense was tremendous. His offense was so steady and consistent. We went to him a lot of times in the clutch, and he delivered. So I'm happy to say all the guys stayed cool, calm, and collected, and that made all the difference in the world throughout the tournament.
All these guys have talked about that team being very cohesive, a family. And I know you wanted to make sure that they connected with people on campus. You had a no headphones rule when they were walking across and they needed to be together. They all talked about Wichita State and walking through the Verizon Center and seeing those guys from the Shockers put their head down. They didn't want to make eye contact with your team because of losing to them a few weeks before. Do you think that cohesiveness, that family value that you tried to put into them helped in that situation where they kind of knew, hey, we already got these guys a couple weeks ago. Now they're in our place. We're already together. We got this game.
Well, I think there was a tremendous amount of confidence because we were playing in the Verizon Center. No, we were, 30 minutes from home. And the thing about our players, eight of our players were from the DMV. If you look at the starting lineup, Tony Skinn, Lamar Butler, Fowler Campbell, Will Thomas, and Jai Lewis, their families would drive down to see every home game. They would be at that Sweet 16 and Elite 8 game. And they would have been there even if we played away, but just having all the families there on a regular basis. Gabe Norwood was just a little bit further away in Pennsylvania. Chris Fleming from Northern Virginia. I mean, we just had so much local flavor. Even Charles Makings, who was a walk-on that year, who almost just quit playing basketball. I had to convince him to stay on the team because we needed him. He was such a good practice player and such a valuable part of the program. Even though he didn't earn a lot of minutes on the court, we couldn't have done it without him. So he stayed. His family was behind us. This was really a total team effort and a tremendous family atmosphere.
Coach, when you look at the UConn game, and a lot has been made, everybody's written the stories about the starters going the last 15, 20 minutes of that contest. But I think a lot of people have forgotten that you basically ran the same offensive set for probably the last 12, 15 minutes of the game. You can go back and watch the game and see the same set over and over again. Was there any surprise? Was there any shock from you, your coaching staff, that, hey, they're letting us do whatever we want to do here offensively?
Well, the interesting part about when you go into a game, there are certain matchups that become critically important and how you're going to be defended. And when we played Michigan State, they had a big team, so they just played behind in the post and let our guys catch it. Carolina, the same way. Wichita State was a little bit different, but we were familiar with them. And then playing Connecticut, who was so big, they thought they could just match up with us and play us man to man. Whereas the teams in our league, they double team Jai Lewis, they double team Will Thomas, and then we'd have to make adjustments. In these games, we had to make very little adjustments, and we ran the same play from the 15-minute mark in the second half all the way through the overtime because we knew it would work because of the way UConn was defending us.
When you look at the overall run from, again, Michigan State to North Carolina, Wichita State, UConn, the four coaches that you obviously should be in the same level as them now as an ACC coach and a very successful one. But at the time, did you and your staff look at the teams and the squads that you beat and went, wow, we made it to the Final Four, but look at the teams that we had to go through. Look at the Hall of Fame coaches that we had to go through, and even take more pride in that?
Well, the funny thing is, before the season started, I invited Dr. Bob Rotella in to speak with the team. And he asked our team how good they thought they could be. And Lamar Butler raised his hand and said, hey, I think we're good enough to get to the Final Four. And then Bob Rotella told them, when you're watching games on TV, you can no longer look at it like a fan and listen to Dickie V say how awesome Connecticut is or Carolina is or Kentucky is. You got to look at them as a competitor does, because those are the teams you have to beat to get to the Final Four. You're not playing against mid-majors or low majors. Your first round opponent is likely to be a high major team from a power conference, maybe even who's won a national championship before. They have the tradition and the experience. What you have to have is that inner confidence as a group that not only can you play with them, that you're good enough to beat them.
Coach, when you look back and you think about these players, obviously the three seniors were a big part of everything that you guys did. You had Gabe Norwood come off the bench and start two of the games in the NCAA tournament for you. All these guys, to a man, talk about what a great influence you've had on them, whether it's in their basketball career or otherwise. When you look back, and obviously you've coached hundreds of players, but is there anything special off the court that you see from these guys? Do they still keep in touch? Do they still call and get your advice, whether it's basketball or just life in general? And how special is that connection to those guys?
Well, as we tell them during the recruiting process, all of our prospects, we tell them this is a family affair. My assistant coaches are like either older brothers or now they're like uncles, a little older in age now. But back then, we had young guys and I was the father figure. I was the surrogate parent. I had to establish a philosophy and approach to life skills that we wanted to teach them. How to shake hands and look somebody in the eye. How to address people when you speak with them. The importance of being a role model in the community and being a contributor in society. And we spent a lot of time on teaching the guys about how important it is to have a positive attitude, to make a total commitment to being the best that you can be, and to always behave in a first-class manner. If my guys can't recite to you to this day attitude, commitment in class, then they weren't listening closely enough, because we talked about it all the time, Bill.
Yeah, we've heard that a lot from the guys, just about how, there was a proper way to do things, and you were going to do things a certain way, and they all felt like that helped them succeed, not only in the NCAA tournament, but obviously in their post George Mason career as well. When you look back, and again, it's been 15 years, and you've had a lot of success since leaving Mason and going down to Miami, some incredible teams down there as well. But when you look back on your time at Mason, and maybe not even just that particular year, but the entirety of that 14-year run of pulling the university, the basketball program, from where it was at rock bottom and leading them to an NCAA tournament Final Four, and then your final year, another win in the NCAA tournament. I imagine, even now being an ACC head coach, that you take a lot of pride in what you were able to establish here in those 14 years.
Oh, for sure. I remember someone telling me when we accepted the job at George Mason, April 1st, 1997, that George Mason was the losingest program in Colonial Athletic Association history. They asked me why I would even take that job when we were enjoying success at Bowling Green. They also reminded me that we had had 7 straight losing seasons, and we were likely going to be picked last in the league going into my first season. And what I told them is we had a very specific goal in mind, and that was to recruit locally, to try to get maybe not the best player on DeMatha or O'Connell or Gonzaga, but to recruit local products and build a program that the people in the community would love following, because they would have followed them. One of the things about Washington, D.C. is it's the best basketball city in America. It's got more really good players than any other city that I know of. And I loved recruiting those local products and loved building a fan base where I know if it was a Saturday in January when we were playing conference games, we were likely to be sold out. We were drawing great crowds by the, middle of my 14 years there. And people were following us like we were, an up and coming program. And then when we left after 14 years, I was reminded that we're leaving as the winningest program in the Colonial Athletic Association history, and that I was the winningest coach, not only in George Mason history, but in the league's history. So we were able, as a coaching staff, because I had great assistants, Bill Courtney and Mike Gillian and Derek Kellogg joined me right away. Eric Conkle, Michael Uger, Chris Caputo, those guys, Scott Cherry, James Johnson, they helped build the program in my vision. And they recruited the right guys that could win championships. And one of the things I'm most proud of, at the very, very end, we had to play Villanova in the second round of the NCAA tournament. We were wearing white.
Yep.
I believe we were the only CAA team ever to be the higher seed in the NCAA tournament.
And it was
we won.
Yeah,
Bill, you remember that? We won that game.
Oh,
Luke Hancock to the rescue.
Yep, that's right. That's right. And I was going to say, you've had obviously the success from 06, but ending it out in 2011 as well with a victory in the NCAA tournament. One of the few teams programs that have a 500 record in the NCAA tournament, at least in your time at Mason. So obviously the legacy is there. Coach, the last thing for you, and again, we appreciate all the time. You look back at not the basketball necessarily that was done in those 14 years, but the relationships that you had, not only with the players, but the community. When you come back here and recruit, or you're back here for whatever reason, I imagine people still are coming up to you and saying thank you for what you guys were able to accomplish in 2006.
Yeah, I know I get a lot of credit for that, but the guy who really deserves credit and was the president of the university. Dr. Alan Merton was a fantastic leader that I enjoyed working with and working for so much during my 14 years, because it's with his support that we were able to do the things we did. He was always encouraging us to try to build the best program. He used the expression, the basketball program is the marketing arm of our university, because everybody reads the Washington Post. Everybody reads the sports pages in the Washington Post. And if our George Mason basketball program is doing some great things, everybody's going to know about it. So he was my mentor. He was my inspiration for wanting to build the kind of basketball program we did. And our players and my coaching staff were the people who were able to bring that all together on the court and in the community.
Coach, we're going to leave it there. That's a great way to finish off this chat. We appreciate all your time. Good luck this season with your current team. And again, thank you for everything that you did for us 15 years ago. And quite frankly, for the 14 years that you were here, we really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Bill. And you were a big part of it too. Doc Nix, you guys really helped us on and off the court.